Underneath the surface of every conversation, there's a game being played. You feel it. When someone attacks your character, mocks your opinion in front of others, or questions your worth, and your first instinct is to defend yourselves, to explain, to prove them wrong. But in that very moment, without realizing it, you've already lost. Because the second you start defending, you've accepted their frame, and Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. You don't fight for your position by justifying it. You fight by shifting the ground beneath the other person's feet. It begins subtly. You're in a meeting. Someone says, "I don't think you've really thought this through." You freeze for a second, then try to clarify, to respond intelligently, to regain control. But deep down, something doesn't sit right. You become reactive, and that's the trap. Machiavelli's first lesson: the moment you defend, you kneel. Power never explains itself. Power speaks, and others scramble to adjust. That's what you didn't see. That attack wasn't just words. It was a move in the game. The attacker set the frame. You are wrong, prove you're not. And by playing along, you confirm their authority to judge. But what if you didn't answer? What if you smiled and said nothing? Or simply asked, "Interesting. What makes you say that?" Suddenly, you flip the spotlight back. Now they're on trial. That silence you held, that refusal to play defense, it's not weakness. It's the calm of someone who controls the room. You've seen this in those people who never flinch, who never rush to justify themselves. It's not arrogance. It's strategy, because they understand something you're still learning. When you defend, you validate the accusation. Even if you win the argument, you've already lost the frame. Machiavelli called this the appearance of superiority. Not actual strength, just the appearance. But in human behavior, appearances shape reality more than truth does. Imagine a politician accused of corruption. If he responds emotionally, with denial and justifications, people smell guilt. But if he leans back, offers no defense, maybe even jokes about it, the perception changes. People think, he must know something we don't. That uncertainty, that psychological tension, it makes you powerful. And this isn't just for public figures. This is for you, in your relationship, your career, even your family. Every time someone tests you with criticism or provocation, you're standing on a forked path. One road leads to reactivity, the other leads to command. But it takes training to choose silence, to hold still when everything inside you screams to respond. You might remember a moment, maybe it was years ago, when someone disrespected you in front of others. Maybe they questioned your intelligence, mocked your choices. You probably spent days replaying that moment, wishing you'd said the perfect comeback. But what if your power wasn't in having the best argument? What if it was in not engaging at all? There's a quiet force in those who don't flinch. Machiavelli understood this psychological terrain. He wrote that men judge more by the eye than the hand, meaning they respond more to how things appear than how they are. So if you appear unmoved, unbothered, you win the game before it begins. But don't confuse silence with passivity. This isn't about being a doormat. It's about redirection. When someone pushes you, you don't push back. You step aside and let their own momentum undo them. That's how you flip the power. That's how you rise above the fray while others are tangled in it. And sometimes the best move isn't to say nothing, but to shift the lens. Someone says, "You're being too emotional." Instead of explaining yourself, you asked, "Why does my emotion threaten you?" Now you're no longer the accused. You're the observer, calmly dismantling their assumption without raising your voice. Think of every public figure who's been cornered. The ones who stay poised are the ones we admire, even when we disagree with them. Why? Because they don't look desperate to be liked. And that's magnetic. Desperation repels. Composure seduces. The irony is, you've been taught to do the opposite. Since childhood, you were conditioned to explain yourselves. To say, "I'm sorry," even when you weren't wrong. To answer every challenge, to appease every doubt. But that's not how power works. That's how compliance works. Machiavelli would tell you, let them misunderstand you. Let them stew in their assumptions. Because your silence makes them doubt themselves. And in that uncertainty, your presence grows larger than any argument you could have made. Now you start to see power isn't in what you say, it's in what you don't. It's in your restraint, your stillness, your refusal to kneel before someone else's reality. The next time someone tries to corner you with words, don't defend. Pause, observe, and when you do respond, make it a question, not an explanation. Because the moment you stop defending yourself, you stop giving away your power. You notice the shift almost instantly. The more you stop explaining yourself, the more people lean in. They study your silence. They project meanings onto it. Some see mystery, others see strength. A few will feel threatened, but they all feel something, and that's the point. When you speak less, your presence speaks more. That's the essence of Machiavelli's trick. Create power not by force, but by perception. You start to understand this on a deeper level when you look back at the people who made you feel small. The ones who accused, questioned, interrupted, undermined. At the time, you thought, if I can just explain myself clearly enough, maybe they'll see. But they weren't seeking truth. They were seeking control. And every time you defended, you handed it to them, neatly wrapped in your own words. Think about that moment when you finally stopped chasing someone who never gave you clarity. A boss, a parent, a lover. The moment you said nothing instead of pleading. That silence burned louder than all the arguments before it. Not because it was cold, but because it forced them to sit with themselves. Without your defense to distract them, they faced their own reflection. And many couldn't bear it. That's the secret. Defending yourself often shields others from their own discomfort. It gives them a focus outside themselves. But when you stop defending, the mirror turns. Now, they have to confront the questions they threw at you. And suddenly, the power dynamic collapses. It's uncomfortable at first. You'll feel exposed, even guilty, because silence in the face of accusation feels unnatural. But over time, you'll realize that silence isn't passive, it's pressure. The kind of pressure that reveals who's really grounded and who's just loud. Imagine you're in a conflict with someone close to you. They raise their voice. They say, "You never care about how I feel." And instead of saying, "That's not true," you pause. You breathe. You let the moment hang. And then, calmly, you respond, "What makes you feel that way?" It's not agreement. It's leadership. You've moved from defense to curiosity, from the cornered to the commanding. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote, asterisk, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Asterisk, but fear, in this context, doesn't mean aggression. It means emotional gravity, the sense that you won't bend just to be accepted, that you're not desperate for approval, that your sense of self doesn't rely on their permission. And here's where the transformation begins. When you stop defending yourself, something unexpected happens. You begin to define yourself, not through argument, but through action, through posture, through what you tolerate, and more importantly, what you don't. Suddenly, people think twice before confronting you, not because you're intimidating, but because you don't flinch. You don't play their game. And when a game isn't fun anymore, manipulators get bored. They move on, but the ones who stay, they begin to respect you, even if they don't say it out loud. You may have spent years trying to prove you were good enough, kind enough, smart enough, but all that proof diluted your power. Because people don't respect what begs, they respect what holds. When you stop performing, when you stop arguing for your worth, you reclaim the one thing that truly commands respect, your presence. Presence is what changes a room before you speak. Presence is what lingers after you leave. And it's built not on how loudly you speak, but on how little you need to. There's a moment in every power shift where the old you wants to come back. You'll feel the urge to clarify, to be liked, to smooth the edges. But if you can just hold the silence a little longer, you'll cross into something stronger than confidence, sovereignty. The kind of inner steadiness that no one else can give or take away. Machiavelli wasn't writing for tyrants. He was writing for anyone trying to survive in a world where perception is power, and that includes you. So the next time someone tries to make you defend your integrity, your values, your emotions, pause. Let the silence stretch. Not because you're weak, but because you know something they don't. The moment you stop defending yourself, is the moment they start defending why they ever tried to attack you in the first place. That's how you flip the power. Instantly, quietly, permanently. And just like that, you begin to see it ripple through every part of your life. In the meeting room, where someone questions your decisions with that familiar smirk, the one that used to make you stumble into over-explaining. Now you just look at them, let the air grow heavy. Let their question echo unanswered. And soon, they shift uncomfortably in their seat, realizing you won't dance to the rhythm of their doubt. Or in your relationships, when someone pushes your boundaries and waits for you to crack, you simply step back, not in retreat, but in strength. You no longer feed the cycle. You no longer play the part of the agreeable one. And you watch, not with anger, but with clarity, as the illusion of their control begins to dissolve. You used to think that connection came from being understood, that if you explained yourself well enough, people would finally see you. But now you know, true connection doesn't come from proving anything. It comes from being clear, being calm, being so rooted in who you are that no one can twist you out of shape. You begin to live differently. You speak less, but your words land deeper. You no longer fill every silence with nervous justifications. You let your no be a full sentence. You let your yes come without apology. And when conflict arises, you don't scramble to prove you're good. You show it by how you carry yourself when things get messy. It's in that stillness that real power grows. Not the loud, performative kind that needs an audience, but the quiet, unwavering kind that people feel when they're near you. The kind of power that makes others check their tone before they speak to you. That makes them think harder before they blame you. That turns manipulation into discomfort because you no longer offer yourself up to be twisted. And it's not just about defense anymore. You realize that every time you refuse to explain yourself, you gave others a chance to step into accountability. When you didn't defend your absence, they had to question their presence. When you didn't justify your boundary, they had to ask why they expected you to erase it. You flip the dynamic so completely that it almost feels surreal. People who used to poke at your insecurities now tread lightly. Not because you've become cold, but because you become unshakable. You stop fighting for space, and instead became the space others adjust to. You've internalized what Machiavelli hinted at, but rarely said outright. Power isn't something you seize, it's something you stop giving away. And one of the most common ways people give it away is through unnecessary defense. Every over-explained boundary, every desperate clarification, every emotional plea not to be misunderstood, those were little leaks in your presence. And now, you sealed them. There's a strange peace that comes with this shift. You no longer carry the burden of being liked. You no longer flinch when someone misunderstands you. You don't panic when people distance themselves. You've learned that silence doesn't mean weakness. It means trust in yourself, in your values, in a long game. Because the truth is, people eventually come around. Not all, but the ones that matter. The ones who once demanded explanations return with quiet respect. The ones who used to challenge your every word now choose theirs more carefully. And some, the manipulators, simply vanish. Not because you chase them away, but because they can't thrive where they're not being fed. And what about those moments when you're alone, questioning everything? They still come, but now you meet them differently. You no longer spiral into self-doubt. Instead, you ask, do I believe in the choice I made? And if the answer is yes, that's enough. No defense, no extra words, just the steady fire of someone who no longer performs for approval. This is what it means to live with inner sovereignty. It's not about winning every argument. It's about realizing that some arguments are designed to keep you small, and choosing not to step into them is the real victory. You don't defend, you define, you don't chase understanding. You embody clarity. And when others try to pull you back into the old dance, the one where you twist yourself to be understood, you smile gently and you don't move. Because you've remembered something that changes everything. The most powerful thing you can do in a world obsessed with being heard is to become someone who no longer needs to explain. That is how you flip the power, not with noise, but with knowing.